Okay, hi everyone. My name is Brianna Abbott. I'm one of the counselors. I'm joined by Mrs. Schnell and Mrs. Himmel. We are thankful that all of you are joining us, and we are going to talk about stress management today. I will be sharing my screen in just a minute. Just as a quick reminder, again, we are recording this presentation. This is a part of our ongoing Lunch and Learn series where we meet about once a month and share a very quick topic on an area of interest that we think will be beneficial to you as parents in helping your son or daughters. And stress is definitely one of those topics that can be something that we know impacts all of our lives. And so we're hopeful that today's presentation will be helpful to you. It is always a very quick presentation. It's a 30-minute session so that we make sure that we cover the information that we think will be most helpful to you. We give time for you to ask any questions that you want. If you have questions as we go through this presentation, feel free to just add those into the chat, and we will be able to address those at the very end. So again, today we're talking about stress management, and we're glad that you're here. So the goal with stress management isn't to get rid of all stress. It seems like a great idea. Like, I want a life that's filled with no stress at all. And that's never going to be the goal, because that's not realistic. And at the same time, all stress isn't bad. This little graph chart thing over on the right-hand side, where it talks about optimal performance, is actually a model based on the Yerkes-Dodson's principle. But all that is to say is that if we have too little stress, we're typically pretty bored, we lack motivation, we lack that drive to get anything done. We need enough stress, a lot of times a deadline or an expectation that we have to give a product to someone else, that can push us to be able to achieve at the levels that we want to. But at the same time, if we keep going beyond that optimal place, we can get to the place where we get completely overwhelmed and it becomes a problem. So we want to kind of be in that middle range where we have enough stress that it helps us to be doing our optimal performance without so little or so much that it sends us into a problem state with regards to our mental health or our ability to get things done. People that are dealing with too much stress may struggle in a lot of ways, and this is a very real challenge. We may have trouble managing emotions. If I am feeling very stressed and very overwhelmed, I may not even know how to manage the emotions that I'm dealing with. I just know that I'm stressed, and that's all I can feel and all I can focus on. And a lot of times when that happens, then people will turn towards those unhealthy coping mechanisms, which is never a good thing. But also, what I was saying, like, sometimes it can lead to that shutdown piece where it's truly impacting us physically or emotionally. And my guess is that for many parents or adults, you've experienced times where there's been a lot of stress, and then either at that time or just after that, you end up getting sick. Physically sick from that experience. You get a cold, you get a flu, where your body's reaction to all of this stress is that it can't fight everything all at once. And so stress can be a big challenge when we have too much of it. And so it is really important to try to find ways to manage it, which is a lot of times easier said than done. And we acknowledge that. And part of the reason that it can be an easier said than done situation is that what works for one person might not work for someone else. And so an approach that might feel like it's helping me to decrease my stress may not be something that could work for someone else in that same situation. And so being able to tailor what's going to feel right for me, what are going to be those strategies and approaches that I can use when I'm starting to feel my stress level build, is an important opportunity for students and parents to be able to look at things together and brainstorm what could work for you in this circumstance. And even though it doesn't always sound logical, we need to practice those stress management strategies, those coping strategies when we are in a calm place, so that we know the things that help us feel even more relaxed, as opposed to trying to just pull on it for the first time when we're feeling really stressed. And so we're going to give you some approaches that can be tailored to different situations and different dynamics that we hope will work for you and your kids.
So the reason we call this A+ stress management is because the Mayo Clinic has developed a practice that they recommend when approaching stress, and it includes 4 A's. So avoid, alter, adapt, and accept. So we ideally keep these A's in mind in hopes that, we can evaluate any given stressful situation and utilize at least one of these 4 principles that we'll talk about here to inform our approach and help maybe frame our mindset. So to start, we have avoid, meaning avoid unnecessary stress. So it's helpful to identify and maybe even become aware of the stressors in our lives. So for instance, taking inventory of the habits or excuses, attitudes, people, etc., in order to help identify the things that we can control and then therefore avoid. So whether that's avoiding the people that may be creating stress or learning to say no, sometimes we can be people pleasers. And so learning to say no when we need to, generating a to-do list that helps prioritize like the needs or the musts over our like shoulds, and letting go of the idea that we can do everything all at once. The next, if you can't avoid the stressors, our next A, we do our best to potentially alter them. So for instance, if someone is bothering you, it's helpful to communicate with that person in an assertive, but also very respectful way. And in addition, when we use our voice and voice these concerns to someone, and ask them to change something, we also, need to come to the table and be willing to compromise and do the same. It can, of course, feel really scary. I know we see this in our students a lot. It can feel scary, but it is helpful to manage our problems head on and confront the problems and be assertive and set those boundaries. So that's something that we talk with our students a lot about, is those boundaries. So something that we're continuously working on in addition to those boundaries is time management. So the better that we can balance our tasks, the better we can approach our problems with a calm and focused mind. So we can't control everything around us. We certainly can, though, control how we approach our stressors and can do our best, to make time to fill our own cups and engage in some self-care and set those boundaries.
Okay, so some additional things that we can do with those 4 A's is to adapt. So that's where we need to just or revise, kind of look at the standards and expectations that we've put on ourselves and how can we adapt to those things. So looking at just different perspectives, will this matter in a year from now? I actually just got done with a senior, a conversation about just some stress that she's feeling and just reminding her, don't quote me, but I think there's really only about 40 some days left for our senior class, which seems quite crazy. But I think I wanted her to realize in that moment, let's just adapt the expectation we have in this situation. Let's become more realistic to what is really on our plate. And is that going to matter in the grand scheme of things when we look at that short amount of time? So really helping our students to look at the expectations that most of the time they put upon themselves and what it is that actually really matters in that situation. So helping them to just like reformalize their thoughts and think about things in a different way, adapt to this situation is the next of those 3 A's. Then next is acceptance. Sometimes we don't really have a choice in the stressors that we're facing. This is what we have to deal with. This has been put on our plate. If we had a magic wand, maybe we would just make things go away, but that's not the reality of our lives. That's not the reality of our students' lives, and getting them to understand that is very important. So kind of that acceptance piece, moving forward and having just an understanding of this is what it is. I'm going to have to take this on, but I have the skill sets. I can talk to other people. I can move past this just by accepting it can be actually very therapeutic. Letting them know that once I do that acceptance, I'm going to be able to tackle this and then move forward. That's kind of the last of those 4 A's that we really want our students to understand. I think then in summary, these are kind of our 4 A's to stress management. And from our school counseling perspective, these would be the tools that we would want you to talk to your student about when they're engaging with you about their stressful activity or what is stressing them out. I think first and foremost, when your students are coming to you with that stress, that in and of itself is a win. They're talking about it. They're looking for ways that you as their parent, guardian can help them to accept, avoid, alter, or adapt. That in and of itself is the first step to helping. Most of the time too, just having that outlet of being heard as to what is stressful is going to allow them to release and then automatically feel a little less stressed about what is going on in their lives. So you as a parent being able to bring up these 4 A's is what we think would be very beneficial for our students and for you as you engage in this dialogue with them. Then just kind of a lighthearted stress is dessert spelled backwards. That's just lovely. Knowing that, there is something to gain from the stress in our lives. This is kind of making it more of a lighthearted thing. But we do have to understand that it is very much a part of what we have to deal with on the daily. Stress is going to be a natural part of the day. Avoiding it is not going to make us a better person. Accepting it, looking how we can learn, grow, gain more knowledge from it is ideally what we want for our students, and not just to say that it's automatically going to go away. So just a lighthearted way that we would like to leave you when it comes to stress. So we are absolutely happy for you guys to go ahead and start to add things to our chat, questions, things that we can help you with as you talk to your students about this. And then we just want to remind you too of our next meeting, which is April 12th. And we're going to be talking about understanding GPA, which I know is a really important topic to a lot of our families and students.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hope that you will enter some of your questions in the chat so that we can address them, because we really do want to. We like I said at the beginning, this is a part of our ongoing series where we always try to, give about half of our 30 minutes of the time to sharing information with you, and then half the time to be able to be responsive to any of the, questions, concerns, ideas, things that you wanted to bring forward. I think too that there's an element of understanding that stress is not just a one-time thing, that it's going to be something that will happen to us as humans throughout our entire lifespan. Being a teenager is very stressful in and of itself. They've got hormone changes. They're trying to figure out who they are, where they fit in this world, what they're going to be when they grow up. There's so many different things that are exciting opportunities for them for the future, but also create stress and uncertainty in their lives. And so just knowing that, they might not be trying to deal with the same stress that we are as adults. They're not necessarily trying to, afford to, work a job that's paying for all the bills and taking care of, figuring out what you're going to make for dinner every night, or, whatever it is that you have as parents, as stressors. But their stress is different, but it's still just as valid too. And so being aware and understanding that it's going to look different, but learning those skills now as a high school student and being able to use those in different settings, that was really the reason that we like that 4A approach, because it can apply to every different setting that they'll find themselves in. And I know that kids can sometimes come in and explode at you. And like Mrs. Himmel was saying, if you're seeing that from your son or daughter, know that that's a good thing, that they're at least expressing what's going on for them. Obviously, we want them to do that in healthy ways. So, letting your stress out verbally and saying, this is what all's going on with me, and having those safe people to be able to talk to is a really valuable thing. If we're punching walls or kicking the dog, like that's unsafe and unhealthy. And so we really want to make sure that we're focusing on those ways to try to manage it, so that it doesn't reach that level.
I will also add a quick plug. Our counselor website also is a great resource for just general like coping skills and things like that. Obviously, we are always available if you want to send us an email or something's coming up with your student. We are, of course, a resource here for you as well. But our counselor website, if we're not like able to answer your questions right away, there are a lot of wonderful resources on there that you can look at.
And I did just add the counselor website to the chat so that if you didn't know what it is, but our counselor website is www.wkhscounselors.com. And then the stress related information would be in the personal social section. We did get our first question, and I will let either Mrs. Schnell or Mrs. Himmel answer, but I'll share it with everyone because it's a very good question, which is, any thoughts on guiding freshmen on overscheduling? And it's not even just freshmen, but for students that want to overschedule, thoughts on how we help navigate that with kids.
Yeah, I think it is a difficult balance because some of our students do want to feel that challenge, and 7 classes might be that appropriate level of being challenged. So it is kind of a give and take, and trying to understand them as an individual student. I think if there is a student who has felt super successful and wanting to challenge themselves, it's always easier to drop a class and add an academic prep. I will say across the board, I think every student should have a lunch. We need to nourish our bodies and our brains to help regulate our emotions and focus in class. But if they are considering taking 7 courses, I think it's important to look at how many honors classes they're taking. And like if they've needed want to try to take 7 classes out of the 8, they have the first 6 weeks of the semester to drop a class, and we can add an academic prep. So that it's kind of a tough give and take in learning.
And I think
these as freshmen.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes back to you as parents, knowing your son or daughter. If there's somebody that stresses already, then that's probably not a healthy choice for them. If there's somebody who's a perfectionist and goes towards like, I have to have it all be perfect all of the time, that's probably something that you really want to caution them away from, because then that exact child would be the type of person that's going to really struggle to drop down and get rid of that class and take it later. If your son or daughter is somebody that doesn't do change well, and whatever they start with is what they're going to think they need to keep the whole time. But again, that's where it's, your son or daughter, and what they can do with that. It feels really good to a student to have a teacher say, well, of course you can go for honors or for AP or for IB or for College Credit Plus. Like, that feels good that the teachers are recognizing that potential in you. But we all can't be perfect at everything. And so being willing to pick the places, like, I want to push myself in the areas that truly are passions for me, not just because I'm a good student, and letting my interests guide that for you too.
Yeah, I think to echo a little bit, sorry.
No,
I think
go
to
ahead.
echo a little bit of that, it is more so asking your student, what's the why behind these choices? So if they have a really good reason related to what Ms. Abbott was saying, more about their passions versus, well, such and such who sits next to me is taking these classes, so I feel like I should, that's kind of the difference. And that should really help guide you. So I think just what's the why behind the courses that they've selected.
Yep. It's exactly what I was going to say. So thank you, Mrs. Himmel, for doing that.
I will also put a little plug out there. So we said that the April Lunch and Learn session is on understanding the GPA, but I will also point out that the May one is about perfectionism. and managing that, because we know that that's a big challenge for a lot of our kids. So if that's something that resonates with you and your child, know that our May Lunch and Learn topic is about perfectionism. Other questions, thoughts, ideas you've had related to the stress you're seeing or hearing in your kids, or anything else you would like us to make sure that we address? Okay, so we never want to take more of your time than if you don't have questions, we don't want to just make you sit here with us. But again, we're very grateful for all of you joining us. We will put a copy of this presentation next week sometime. We'll have it posted to the counselor website. And you know, just that final reminder that stress is a part of life, and that's not a bad thing unless it becomes too much. And then we want to make sure that we're helping, you know, the students to learn those skills to be able to manage it effectively, so that it doesn't derail their whole existence and being. And we're thankful to have parents in partnership with that. You know, we're happy to help in that aspect when we're talking to kids, but it's a team effort for sure in helping support kids to learn how to navigate this. So again, thank you all for coming. Thanks for being here. We're glad to have you, and we hope you have a good weekend. Some stress that your kids may have is that next week the quarter ends. So definitely help support them with the fact that they may have lots of stress in the coming week with lots of tests and quizzes to finish out the quarter. But again, thanks for being here with us today.